What is the true price of a cup of coffee? For most, it's a few dollars. But for Chloe Washington, a 26-year-old waitress drowning in debt and despair, the price was her job. For a lonely old man named Arthur, it was the answer to a billion-dollar question. This isn't a fairy tale. This is the story of how one small, seemingly insignificant act of kindness in a Greasy Spoon diner in Cleveland, Ohio, ignited a firestorm of greed, betrayal, and legal warfare. It's a story that proves the most powerful currency in the world isn't money, but character, and how a simple gesture can change everything for better and for worse. The smell of stale coffee and sizzling bacon grease was the perfume of Chloe Washington's life. It clung to her clothes, her hair, and she was sure deep in her very soul. At 26, she was a veteran of the service industry, a master of balancing 4 plates on one arm while reciting the daily specials with a smile she didn't feel. The smile was the hardest part. Her stage was the Morning Glory Diner, a relic of a bygone era nestled in a tired corner of Cleveland. It was a place of cracked vinyl booths, a jukebox that only played songs from before she was born, and regulars who measured their lives in coffee refills. For Chloe, each shift was an 8-hour tightrope walk over a chasm of financial ruin. Her mother, Brenda, was fighting a battle with pulmonary fibrosis, and the medical bills were a relentless rising tide. Chloe's dream of finishing nursing school was submerged beneath them, a casualty of co-payments and prescription costs. So she worked. She took double shifts whenever she could, her feet aching, her spirit fraying, fueled by cheap coffee and the fierce, desperate love for her mum. That Tuesday morning was particularly bleak. A cold, damp November wind rattled the diner's large plate glass window. The breakfast rush had been brutal. A whirlwind of demanding customers, spilled orange juice, and the constant grating presence of her manager, Mr. Henderson. Henderson was a man whose soul had been pickled in vinegar. He watched the staff like a hawk, his beady eyes constantly scanning for any infraction a minute too long on a break. A portion of fries that looked too generous, a friendly chat that wasn't actively generating a tip. He especially disliked Chloe's habit of giving a free refill to an old-timer who looked down on their luck. "This isn't a charity, Washington," he'd hiss. "Every drop costs." Around 10:30 a.m., when the rush had subsided to a low simmer, the old man came in. He didn't look like a regular. He moved slowly, deliberately, as if each step was a negotiation with gravity. He wore a faded, threadbare coat that was no match for the Cleveland chill, and his hands, spotted with age, trembled slightly. He chose the smallest booth in the back, the one with the biggest tear in the vinyl, and sat with a quiet dignity that seemed out of place amidst the clatter. Chloe approached him, her order pad ready. "Coffee, hon?" she asked, her voice gentle. He looked up, and his eyes were the most startling thing about him. They were a pale, clear blue, and they held a deep, assessing intelligence that belied his shabby appearance. They weren't clouded by age or poverty. They were sharp. "Just a coffee, please. Black," he said, his voice a low, raspy whisper. She brought it to him, placing it carefully on the table so it wouldn't slosh. He wrapped his trembling hands around the warm ceramic mug, and a flicker of something gratitude relief passed across his face. For the next hour, he just sat there. He didn't read a paper or look at a phone. He just watched. He watched Chloe handle a rude customer who complained his eggs were too runny. He watched her patiently explain the menu to an elderly couple who couldn't read the small print. He watched her share a quick, whispered laugh with Maria the cook. He saw the weariness in her shoulders, but the light in her eyes when she spoke to someone with genuine kindness. When it was time to leave, he shuffled to the front counter where Chloe was ringing up another customer. He waited his turn patiently. When he reached the register, he looked down at the simple bill. £2.25. He fumbled in his coat pockets, then his trousers. A look of mild panic, then genuine distress crossed his face. He pulled the pockets inside out, revealing nothing but lint. I'm terribly sorry, he stammered, his face flushing with embarrassment. I seem to have forgotten my wallet. Mr. Henderson, who had been lurking near the kitchen door, swooped in. Forgotten or forgotten, he sneered, making air quotes with his fingers. We hear that one a lot. The old man flinched, his shoulders slumping. He looked humiliated. I assure you it's an honest mistake. I live nearby. I can go and get it. Yeah, right, Henderson scoffed. And I'm the King of England. Pay up or I'm calling the cops. We've got a policy on theft. Chloe felt a hot surge of anger. Theft. Over a $2 coffee, she saw the old man's mortification, the way he seemed to shrink under Henderson's accusatory glare. She thought of her own father, who had passed away 5 years prior, but had always carried himself with a quiet pride, no matter how tough things got. This man reminded her of him. Before she could even think it through, she acted. It's okay, Mr. Henderson, she said, pulling her own worn wallet from her apron. I've got it. Don't worry about it. She took out 3 crumpled dollar bills and pushed them into the register, her hands moving quickly, as if to erase the ugliness of the moment. Henderson's eyes narrowed into slits. That's coming out of your tips, Washington. I run a business, not a soup kitchen. I know, Chloe said, not looking at him. She looked at the old man. It's all set, sir. You have a good day. The old man stared at her, his pale blue eyes searching her face. The embarrassment was gone, replaced by an expression of intense, unreadable contemplation. He seemed to be looking right through her, weighing something in his mind. You didn't have to do that, he said softly. Everyone has a rough day, Chloe replied with a small, tired smile. Don't you worry about it. Just pay it forward sometime. He nodded slowly. Pay it forward. He repeated the words, tasting strange and important on his tongue. He held her gaze for a moment longer. Thank you, he said. The words were simple, but they landed with the weight of a solemn vow. Thank you, Chloe. He had heard her name tag. He turned and walked out of the diner, his back a little straighter than when he had come in. Chloe watched him go. A strange feeling settling in her chest. She had no idea that her simple $2 act of kindness had just set in motion a chain of events that would shatter her world and then rebuild it into something she could never have imagined. She just knew she was short $3 and that Mr. Henderson was going to make the rest of her shift a living hell. She was right about the latter, but spectacularly, terrifyingly wrong about the former. 2 days later, Chloe was fired. Mr. Henderson called her into his cramped, cluttered office after her morning shift. He didn't ask her to sit. Washington, this isn't working out. He began, avoiding her eyes as he shuffled papers on his desk. What do you mean? Chloe asked, her heart sinking. Your performance has been subpar, he droned. And the incident the other day, with the old man. It shows a flagrant disregard for company policy. We can't have employees giving away product. It's a gateway to theft. It was $2, Chloe protested, her voice rising. He was being humiliated. I paid for it myself. It's the principle of the matter, Henderson said, his tone cold and final. It sends the wrong message. We're a business. We can't afford that kind of softness. Clean out your locker. Your final check will be mailed to you." Chloe stood there, stunned into silence. Fired. For an act of kindness. The injustice of it was a physical blow knocking the wind out of her. She thought of her mother's next oxygen tank delivery, the rent that was due on the first, the mountain of debt that just grew taller. The $3 she had spent on a stranger's coffee had now cost her everything. The irony was so cruel it felt like a joke, but as she walked out of the Morning Glory diner for the last time, the smell of bacon grease now smelling like failure, no one was laughing. Meanwhile, across town in the sterile, soundproofed penthouse office of a gleaming skyscraper, the old man was undergoing a transformation. The threadbare coat was replaced by a bespoke cashmere blazer. The trembling hands were steady as they accepted a file from a man in a perfectly tailored suit. He was no longer a nameless, penniless patron of a greasy spoon. He was Arthur Pendleton, the reclusive, formidable founder and CEO of Pendleton Industries, a global logistics and technology empire worth billions. The man handing him the file was his longtime attorney and confidant, Samuel Davies. Davies was sharp, pragmatic, and the only person on earth who knew the full story behind Arthur's recent eccentric behavior. The final report on Chloe Washington. Davies said, his voice neutral. Arthur opened the folder. Inside were pages of data surveillance photos and detailed background checks. His team was ruthlessly efficient. They had compiled Chloe's entire life story in 48 hours. Her deceased father, a factory worker. Her mother, Brenda, and the specifics of her medical condition. Her straight-A record in high school. Her 2.5 years of nursing school abandoned due to financial strain. Her student loan statements, her credit card debt, her late rent payments. They even had a transcript of her conversation with Mr. Henderson when she was fired. Arthur read every word, his expression grim. He fired her over it. As you predicted he might, Davies noted. Henderson is a small man with a sliver of power. It's a volatile combination. And the others? Arthur asked, closing the file. Davies gestured to a large screen on the wall. It lit up, showing a matrix of names and faces. The Compassion Initiative, as you've dubbed it, has been running for 6 months. We've vetted 12 potential candidates across the country, all of them placed in situations designed to test their integrity and empathy. He pointed to one photo. A corporate lawyer in Chicago. We had an actor posing as a homeless man accidentally drop a wallet full of cash in front of him. He picked it up, glanced around, and pocketed it. Another photo appeared. A university professor in Austin. Presented with a student plagiarizing out of desperation, he failed her and reported her for academic misconduct without a moment's inquiry into her circumstances. The list went on, each one a story of self-interest, of caution, of people choosing the easy, safe, or profitable path over the compassionate one. And then there's Stephen Galloway, Davies said, bringing up the file of a polished, handsome man in his 40s. He's the board's choice. Director of the Redwood Charitable Foundation. Impeccable resume, fantastic fundraising record, glowing public profile. He ticks every box, Arthur. He's the safe bet. Arthur stared at Galloway's photo. He saw ambition, polish, and a practiced smile. He saw a man who knew how to work the system. He didn't see heart. What did our test reveal on Mr. Galloway? Arthur asked. Davies sighed. That's the thing. We couldn't get close enough for an organic test. His life is too curated. We tried the lost wallet gambit. His personal assistant found it and had it messengered back to our decoy's office within the hour. We tried the distressed stranger approach at a gullah. He politely directed his security to handle it. He's insulated, protected. On paper, he's perfect. Arthur turned from the screen and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the city below. On paper, he mused. My life is built on things that work on paper, Sam. Contracts, balance sheets, stock projections. But I'm not looking for someone to manage a balance sheet. I'm looking for someone to steward a legacy. His mind went back to the diner. The sting of Henderson's contempt. The genuine panic he had felt even knowing it was a charade. And then Chloe's voice cutting through the ugliness. I've got it. The simple, unhesitating decency of it. She had nothing yet she gave. She faced a bully for a stranger. She lost her job for it. My children Marcus and Victoria, Arthur said, his voice laced with a familiar disappointment. They see my foundation as a tax shelter and a PR tool. They would appoint someone like Galloway in a heartbeat. Someone who runs charity like a corporation. All efficiency, no soul. They measure success in dollars raised, not lives changed. He had suffered a minor heart attack 8 months ago. It was a wake-up call. His own mortality, once a distant concept, was now a daily companion. What would he leave behind? An empire of wealth for his grasping, entitled children to fight over, or something more? That's when the Compassion Initiative was born. A secret, unorthodox search for a successor. Not to his company, but to his foundation. He would leave the Pendleton Hope Foundation with an endowment of $5 billion in the hands of someone who understood its true purpose. Someone whose character was the currency. Galloway is the board's choice. He is not mine, Arthur declared, turning back to his lawyer. My choice is the waitress who bought a broke old man a cup of coffee because it was the right thing to do, the one who lost her job for it and didn't complain, just walked away with her dignity. Davies looked skeptical. Arthur, this is unprecedented. She's a waitress. She has no experience managing, well, anything on this scale. The board will revolt. Your children will have you declared mentally incompetent. Let them try, Arthur said, a glint of the old steel in his eyes. They've been trying for years. Now draft the letter. I want to meet with Miss Chloe Washington. It's time to see what she does when faced not with poverty, but with power. The week that followed her firing was one of the bleakest of Chloe's life. Each day was a frantic, soul-crushing cycle of scrolling through online job boards, filling out applications and receiving automated rejections or worse, complete silence. The meager savings she had were evaporating. The conversation with her mother was the hardest. She'd lied, telling her the diner was just cutting back hours, not wanting to add another worry to her mother's already burdened mind. The lie sat like a stone in her stomach. She found herself replaying the scene at the diner over and over. The old man's embarrassed face, Henderson's sneer, her own impulsive gesture. Had she been a fool? Had her kindness been nothing but a self-destructive impulse? The world, it seemed, didn't reward kindness. It punished it. She felt naive, stupid, and utterly alone. On Friday, a thick cream-colored envelope arrived in her mailbox, wedged between a final notice from the electric company and a pizza coupon. It felt heavy and important. Her name and address were typed in an elegant, crisp font. There was no return address, only an embossed seal on the back, a stylized D and F. With a sense of dread, she tore it open. She thought it was from a collection agency, a legal threat for some unpaid bill she'd forgotten. Inside the letterhead was even more intimidating: Davies, Finch and Associates Attorneys at Law. The address was for the Pendleton Tower, downtown, the city's most prestigious and expensive piece of real estate. The letter was brief and formal. It requested her presence for a meeting the following Monday at 10:00 a.m. concerning a matter of significant personal and professional importance. It stated that transportation would be provided. Panic seized her. A law firm. In the Pendleton Tower. She was being sued. It had to be it. Maybe Henderson was suing her for slander. Maybe the old man was part of some scam, and she was now implicated. Her mind raced through a dozen paranoid, catastrophic scenarios. She almost threw the letter away, wanting to hide from whatever new disaster was coming. But a small, stubborn part of her, the same part that had paid for the coffee, decided to face it. Whatever it was, she would face it. On Monday morning, exactly at 9:30 a.m., a black town car, sleek and silent, pulled up in front of her run-down apartment building. The driver, a man in a black suit, got out and opened the door for her, addressing her as Ms. Washington. Chloe, wearing her only good blouse and a pair of slacks she'd ironed twice, felt like an imposter as she slid onto the plush leather seat. The ride to the Pendleton Tower was a journey into another universe. The car moved through the familiar, gritty streets of her neighborhood and into the gleaming corporate heart of downtown Cleveland. The tower itself was a monument of glass and steel that seemed to pierce the clouds. Inside the lobby, a private security guard checked her name against a list and directed her to a dedicated elevator. It shot upwards, the floors blurring past her ears, popping as she ascended to the 60th floor. The doors opened onto a reception area that was larger than her entire apartment. It was a space of quiet, terrifying luxury, modern art on the walls, polished marble floors, and a panoramic view of the city and Lake Erie. A severe-looking woman at a large mahogany desk directed her to a conference room. "Mr. Davies will be with you shortly." Chloe sat at a table that felt as long as a bowling alley, her heart pounding against her ribs. She was a fish not just out of water, but on another planet. After a few minutes that felt like an eternity, the door opened and a man in an expensive suit entered. He was in his late 50s with sharp eyes and an air of no-nonsense authority. "So, Washington, I'm Samuel Davies. Thank you for coming," he said, shaking her hand firmly. His grip was strong and cool. "Please don't be alarmed. You are not in any trouble." His words did little to calm her nerves. "Then, why am I here?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Davies sat down opposite her, placing a thick folder on the table between them. He didn't open it. He just looked at her, his expression analytical, as if he were trying to solve a puzzle. "I am the personal attorney for a client who has taken a special interest in you," he began. "A few days ago, my client was the recipient of an act of kindness from you at your place of employment, the Morning Glory diner." Chloe's mind blanked. The old man." "Indeed," Davies confirmed. "The man whose coffee you paid for." "Is he okay?" she asked, her concern immediate and genuine. Davies allowed a faint smile. "He is more than okay, Ms. Washington. My client is a man of considerable means. His appearance at the diner was a deliberate choice. You might call it a test." Chloe stared at him, confused. "A test I don't understand." "My client has been engaged in a rather unorthodox search," Davies explained, choosing his words carefully. "He is looking for a person of rare character, someone with integrity, empathy, and courage. He believes that how a person acts when they think no one of consequence is watching is the truest measure of who they are. He's been disappointed for the most part, until last Tuesday." He leaned forward slightly. "We are aware that your compassion cost you your job. We are also aware of your personal circumstances, your mother's illness, your nursing school ambitions, your financial difficulties." Chloe felt a flush of anger and violation. They had been investigating her. "You've been spying on me. Researching, Davies corrected smoothly. My client does not make billion-dollar decisions lightly. Billion-dollar? Chloe repeated, her head spinning. At that moment, the conference room door opened again. Chloe turned and her breath caught in her throat. Standing in the doorway was the old man from the diner. But he was transformed. The threadbare coat was gone, replaced by an impeccably tailored dark grey suit. His hair was neatly combed, his posture was erect and confident. The tremor in his hands was gone, but the eyes were the same. Those wild, piercingly blue eyes. He walked into the room and smiled at her, a warm, genuine smile. "Hello again, Chloe," he said. His voice no longer a frail whisper, but a calm, resonant baritone. "I believe we met the other day. My name is Arthur Pendleton." Chloe could only stare, her brain struggling to connect the frail man from the diner with the powerful billionaire standing before her. Arthur sat down next to Davies. "I owe you an apology," he said, "for the deception, and I owe you my thanks, not just for the coffee, but for reminding an old man that genuine goodness still exists in this world." He gestured to the folder. "Mr. Davies has likely told you I've been searching for someone. I am the founder of the Pendleton Hope Foundation, a private charitable organization with a simple mission to provide help where it is needed most. For the last 30 years, I have run it myself. But I am not going to live forever. I need to find a successor, someone who will lead it with heart, not just a calculator." He looked directly at her, his gaze unwavering. "Chloe, I am not here to give you a handout. I am not here to simply pay off your debts, though we will do that. I am here to offer you a job." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "I want you to be the new executive director of the Pendleton Hope Foundation. You will be given an office in this building, a staff and control over an annual operating budget of $100 million. Your starting salary will be $500,000 a year. Your mission will be to find people like you, people who are struggling, people who are overlooked, people who need a second chance, and you will use the foundation's resources to help them. You will finish nursing school if you still wish. We will provide the best medical care in the world for your mother. All I ask in return is that you lead this foundation with the same heart you showed me in that diner." Chloe sat in stunned, absolute silence. The world had tilted on its axis. The numbers, the words, the sheer impossibility of it all washed over her. $500,000. $100 million. Help her mother. It was a dream, a fever dream, brought on by stress and poverty. "Why?" she finally whispered. "Why me? I don't have a degree. I don't know anything about running a foundation. I'm just a waitress." "No," Arthur said gently, but with immense conviction. "You are the only person who passed the test." For 48 blissful hours, Chloe Washington lived in a fairy tale. The crushing weight that had been a permanent resident on her shoulders for years simply vanished, replaced by a giddy, breathless sense of disbelief. The first thing she did was sit at her small kitchen table with her laptop, her hands trembling so much she could barely type. She logged into the government portal for her student loans, the website that had been a source of so much dread. The balance, a monstrous 5-figure number she thought she'd be paying off for the rest of her life, stared back at her. With a click guided by instructions from Mr. Davies's office, she transferred the funds. The screen refreshed, balance $0. A sob escaped her lips, a sound of pure, unadulterated release. The next call was to the Cleveland clinic. A calm, kind voice on the other end of the line. A world-renowned specialist, not a beleaguered scheduling assistant, patiently outlined a cutting-edge treatment plan for her mother Brenda. There was talk of new medications, of advanced physical therapy, of possibilities Chloe had never dared to dream of. When the doctor asked for insurance information, she was told, "It's all been taken care of, Ms. Washington. Just bring your mother in." She wept again when she told Brenda not the partial, edited truth this time, but the whole unbelievable story. Her mother, sitting up in her bed, looking stronger than she had in months, held her daughter's hand and stared at her as if she were a miracle. The first direct deposit of her salary landed in her new bank account, a number with so many zeros it looked like a typo. For the first time since her father died, Chloe felt safe. She breathed without a hitch in her chest. She had forgotten what that felt like. But fairy tales have villains, and in this story, they were about to make their entrance. Arthur Pendleton, a man who preferred directness to dithering, informed his 2 children of his decision via a formal notice from Samuel Davies's office. He knew a personal call would only devolve into screaming and accusations. The notice was a sterile legal instrument, but it landed in their lives like a declaration of war. Marcus Pendleton, 48 and perpetually tanned, was lining up a birdie putt on the 18th hole of a sun-drenched private course in Palm Beach when his phone buzzed. He read the email from his lawyer, his face darkening with each line. The carefully constructed calm he cultivated for his golf game evaporated. With a roar of pure fury, he hurled his $3,000 Scotty Cameron putter into a water hazard, sending a flock of startled egrets into the air. His sister Victoria, 45, and impeccably preserved, was in a velvet-lined private viewing room at a Sotheby's auction in London. She was about to raise her paddle for a late-period Matisse when her own phone vibrated with a priority alert. As she read the same notice, her perfectly composed face, a canvas of expensive serums and subtle cosmetic work, contorted into a mask of venomous rage. She snapped her phone shut, the sound like a gunshot in the quiet room. The Matisse was forgotten. To them, this wasn't about the Hope Foundation's mission. It was about their birthright. The foundation was a useful tool for tax purposes and for generating the kind of glowing press that opened doors to exclusive social circles. But it was still in their minds, their money. And their father, the old man, was giving control of it and the status that came with it to a nobody. A waitress, a grimy little person from the real world they had spent their lives insulated from. It was a grotesque public humiliation. It was also a terrifying precedent, if he was this senile. Now, what would he do with the rest of the estate? A flurry of encrypted calls and venomous text messages crossed the Atlantic. The strategy was formed with cold, swift brutality. They would not attack their father directly at first. They would destroy Chloe Washington. The first salvo was fired in the court of public opinion. Chloe was enjoying a cup of coffee in a small neighborhood cafe, a simple luxury she hadn't allowed herself in years, when she noticed the headline on a tablet at the next table. The font was lurid, the color scheme garish, and her own face was staring back at her. Billionaire's brain fade, senile tycoon, Arthur Pendleton, duped by gold-digging waitress. Her blood ran cold. The article was a masterpiece of malicious fiction. It used an old, unflattering photo from her forgotten social media. Her face caught in a goofy expression and juxtaposed it with a paparazzi shot of Arthur looking frail and confused, taken weeks after his heart attack. The narrative painted her as a cunning, street-smart predator who had researched and targeted a vulnerable, lonely old man. Her history of poverty wasn't a struggle. It was a motive. The comments section was a sewer of anonymous vitriol, calling her every vile name imaginable. In the space of a morning, her name, Chloe Washington, had been transformed from a private identity into a public slur. The second salvo was legal. Davies called her into his office, his face grim. "They've filed," he said, pushing a thick document across his desk. "A motion to have Arthur declared mentally incompetent. They're seeking a conservatorship." He explained in stark terms what it meant. They wanted to strip Arthur of his legal right to make his own decisions, to control his own finances, his own life. And she. Chloe was Exhibit A, the living, breathing proof of his supposed insanity. The third and most brutal salvo was personal. One evening as she left the Pendleton Tower, the weight of the day pressing down on her, she walked into the echoing quiet of the executive parking garage. A sleek black sports car, low and aggressive, was parked beside her modest new sedan. A tall, imposing man leaned against it, his arms all crossed. He had Arthur's strong jawline, but his eyes were cold and empty of any kindness. It was Marcus Pendleton. "Chloe Washington," he said, his voice a low drawl of condescension. He pushed off the car, blocking her path. "You're a harder woman to get a hold of than my father." "Excuse me," Chloe said, trying to step around him, her heart starting to hammer against her ribs. He moved with her, a predator, cutting off an escape route. "Let's cut the crap!" He spat, the thin veneer of civility gone. "We know what you are. A little parasite who found a big fat host. I'm here to tell you the party's over." He stepped closer, invading her personal space. "You're going to call a press conference. You're going to publicly renounce the position. You'll issue a statement saying you took advantage of an old man's confusion. You'll cry a little, it'll be very convincing. Then you'll disappear. If you do," he added, a cruel smile touching his lips, "we'll make sure a quiet little trust fund is set up for you, enough to live comfortably, out of sight." Chloe stared at him, her fear mixing with a hot surge of righteous anger. "Your father offered me a job because he believes in me." Marcus let out a short, ugly laugh. "My father believes in fairy tales. He's a senile old fool, and you're the big bad wolf. But this isn't a storybook, sweetheart. This is the real world, and in the real world, people like you don't win. You get crushed." He leaned in his expensive cologne, suffocating her, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You should be thinking about your mother. Brenda, isn't it? Such lovely top-of-the-line care she's getting. It would be a real shame if her treatment suddenly got complicated. Paperwork gets lost all the time. Referrals get denied. Things happen." The threat, veiled but unmistakable, struck Chloe with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't about money or a job anymore. They were threatening her mother's life. She stumbled back to her car, her hands shaking so badly she could barely get the key in the ignition. She drove home in a blur of tears and terror, the ugly confrontation playing over and over in her mind. That night, huddled in her apartment, she called Arthur, her voice breaking. "I can't do this." She sobbed into the phone, the words tumbling out in a panicked rush. "I can't. They're right. Marcus, the articles, all of it. They're right about me. I'm not qualified. I'm just a waitress. I'm putting you in danger. I'm putting my mom in danger. This is a mistake. I have to walk away." She could hear Arthur sigh on the other end of the line, a sound not of frustration but of profound weariness and resolve. "Chloe," he said, his voice a firm, gentle anchor in her storm. "Listen to me. Their threats are the actions of desperate, frightened children. They are attacking you because they cannot attack the truth of what you represent. They threatened my mother, Arthur. And I anticipated they would," Arthur countered calmly. "The moment I made my decision, I had your mother moved to a private, secure wing of the clinic under an assumed name. My personal security team is with her now. They are the best in the world. Marcus cannot get within a mile of her. His threats are empty." Chloe's sobs hitched a flicker of relief cutting through the fear. "I tested your heart in that diner, Chloe, and it proved to be pure gold." Arthur continued, his voice hardening with purpose. "Now they are testing your spine. Both are required for this job. This is no longer just about running a foundation. This is a fight for its soul. If you walk away now, you are telling them and the world that intimidation works, that bullies win, that kindness is a weakness to be exploited. Do not let them win, Chloe. Do not prove them right." His words sliced through her terror, extinguishing the panic and igniting something else, a core of steel she never knew she possessed. He was right. Walking away meant letting Marcus Pendleton's sneering face be the last word. It would validate every cruel headline, every vicious comment. It would mean that her one act of simple decency was in the end a foolish mistake. She wiped her tears, her breathing steadying. The fear was still there, but it was no longer in control. Resolve took its place. "Okay," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Okay, Arthur. What do we do now?" "Now," Arthur said, and she could hear the hint of a smile in his voice. "We fight back." The day of the competency hearing dawned grey and heavy, the Cleveland sky the color of unpolished steel. For Chloe, it felt like a mirror of the crushing weight in her chest. The Pendleton Tower, once a symbol of impossible hope, now felt like a fortress she had to defend. In a quiet lounge adjacent to the main law offices, she stood by the window, twisting a damp tissue in her hands. She was wearing a simple professional navy blue dress, an outfit Samuel Davies's assistant had helped her pick out. It felt like a costume. Underneath it, she was still just Chloe Washington from the Morning Glory Diner, and she was terrified. Arthur came to stand beside her, his presence a quiet anchor in her swirling anxiety. He didn't offer platitudes or false reassurances. He simply looked out at the city with her. "They will try to make you feel small today, Chloe," he said, his voice calm and even. "They will use your past as a weapon against you. They will attempt to define you by the job you held, not the person you are. Do not let them." She looked at him at the lines of age and wisdom etched on his face. "I'm scared I'll let you down." "Impossible," Arthur stated, turning his clear blue eyes to her. "You have already done the one thing I needed most. You proved I was right to have hope. The rest is just noise." Samuel Davies entered the room, his face a mask of grim determination. "It's time. The courtroom is full. Marcus and Victoria have the entire board of directors sitting behind them like a row of vultures." He gave Chloe a firm, appraising look. "Just remember what we talked about. Answer his questions honestly, and speak from your heart. It's the most powerful weapon we have." Walking through the marble corridor towards the courtroom was the longest journey of Chloe's life. The moment the heavy oak doors swung open, a barrage of sensory information hit her. The hushed, expectant murmur of the crowd, the blinding flash of a photographer's camera from the press gallery, the vastness of the wood-paneled room which felt less like a hall of justice and more like a theater built for the wealthy to watch a public dissection. At the plaintiff's table sat Marcus and Victoria. They were dressed in somber, expensive clothes, their faces arranged into masks of tragic concern, a perfectly executed performance of filial piety. Behind them, as Davies had said, the board members sat stiffly, their expressions ranging from skeptical to hostile. Their legal team, led by the silver-haired shark Lawrence Keane, looked confident, predatory. Chloe took her place between Arthur and Davies at the defense table. She felt 1,000 pairs of eyes on her, judging her, dissecting her. She was the central exhibit in the case against Arthur's sanity, the waitress who held the keys to $1 billion kingdom. Keane's opening argument was a masterclass in theatrical cruelty. He strode before the judge, his voice resonating with practiced gravitas. He painted a picture of Arthur Pendleton as a once great man, a titan of industry, now lost in the fog of senility, a Lear raging on a heath of his own making. "We are here today, not out of greed," Keane proclaimed, gesturing to Marcus and Victoria, "but out of love for a father who is no longer himself, a father who in his twilight has become susceptible to the basest forms of manipulation." He paused, letting his gaze drift slowly, contemptuously over to Chloe. "Consider the evidence," he thundered. "A man who would hand control of a multi-billion-dollar foundation, a sacred trust built over a lifetime, to a complete stranger, a waitress, a young woman with no education, no financial acumen, no managerial experience. A decision so reckless, so divorced from logic, it can only be viewed as a tragic symptom of a mind in decline." He leaned towards the judge. "This isn't philanthropy, Your Honor. This is madness. Arthur Pendleton is a man who needs protection from himself and from the predators who would exploit his profound and heartbreaking weakness." Chloe felt each word like a physical blow. She felt the blood rush to her face, the shame of being publicly branded a con artist, a parasite. She instinctively shrank in her chair, wanting to disappear. Beside her, Arthur sat perfectly still, his expression unreadable, his focus entirely on the judge. When it was Davies' turn, the tone in the room shifted. There were no theatrics, no booming declarations. There was only calm, methodical, precise logic. He presented his own medical experts who testified that Arthur was lucid sharp and in full command of his faculties. He then began to carefully reframe the narrative. "Mr. Keane would have you believe that the Compassion Initiative was an act of a delusional mind," Davies said calmly. "We argue it was an act of genius. Mr. Pendleton was not hiring a CFO. He was hiring a custodian for his legacy of hope. For such a role, a balance sheet is a poor resume. A kind heart, however, is a non-negotiable prerequisite. How does one vet for empathy? How does one test for integrity when no one is looking? Mr. Pendleton devised a test that was elegant in its simplicity and profound in its results." Finally, Davies played his last card. "The defense calls Ms. Chloe Washington to the stand." A hush fell. Every head turned. Chloe's legs felt like lead as she walked the short distance to the witness stand, her sensible heels clicking loudly in the cavernous silence. She could feel Marcus and Victoria's hateful glares boring into her back. She sat, swore the oath, and faced her tormentor. Keane approached her, his smile a condescending sneer. "Miss Washington," he began, his voice dripping with false courtesy. "Let's be clear for the court. Is it true that just 3 weeks ago you were employed as a waitress, earning approximately $30,000 a year, including tips?" "Yes." Chloe managed her voice tight. "And now you have been given a position with a salary of $500,000, a position for which you have no degree, no training, and no experience whatsoever. Yes. A generous benefactor, wouldn't you say? Tell me, did you know who Mr. Pendleton was when you generously paid for his $2 coffee? No, I did not. So it was just a fabulous coincidence, Keene mocked. This life-changing lottery ticket just happened to fall into your lap out of the sheer goodness of your heart. Chloe took a deep breath, remembering Arthur's words. Don't let them define you. I didn't think of it as a lottery ticket, she said, her voice finding a bit more strength. I saw an elderly man being humiliated over a simple mistake, and I did what I thought was right. Keene paced before her, like a wolf circling its prey. And what do you know of running a foundation, Ms. Washington? Can you tell the court what a 501c3 organization's primary fiduciary duties are? Can you explain the difference between restricted and unrestricted endowments? What brilliant strategies have you, a former waitress, devised for this $5 billion enterprise? This was the trap, the flurry of jargon designed to expose her as an ignorant fool. She could see the smirk on his face, the smugness of Marcus and Victoria. But as she looked past them, she saw Arthur, who gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was all the courage she needed. She decided not to play his game. She would play her own. No, Mr. Keene. She began, her voice suddenly clear and steady, cutting through the silence. I can't recite financial regulations like you can. I can't tell you about diversifying portfolios or maximizing asset allocation. You want to know my strategy. My strategy is to remember what it feels like. She leaned forward, her eyes locking with the judge's. My strategy is to remember what it feels like to choose between buying your mother's medicine and paying the rent on time. To remember the cold dread of an overdue notice, the quiet humming silence when the refrigerator stops running because your power has been cut off. My strategy is to remember what it feels like to study for a nursing exam after a 12-hour double shift, your feet screaming in pain, knowing you probably can't afford the next semester's tuition anyway. My strategy is to remember that behind every application for a grant, there isn't a case file number. There's a human being terrified of foreclosure, or a student who dreams of being a doctor, or a single parent who just needs one small bit of help to keep from going under. Her voice resonated with an authenticity that no lawyer could manufacture. The courtroom was utterly still. You see, the people Mr. Pendleton wants to help aren't line items on a spreadsheet. Their problems can't always be solved by a committee in a boardroom. Sometimes they just need one person to look at them to truly see their struggle and to say, I've got this. My qualification for this job isn't a business degree, Mr. Keene. It's the fact that I know exactly who we're fighting for, because a month ago I was one of them. She had not defended herself. She had defended the mission. A stunned silence hung in the air. Keene stood for the first time speechless. It was then that Samuel Davies rose. Your Honor, he announced, the defense has one final piece of evidence to present. On the large courtroom screen, a document appeared. Then another and another. It was the result of the forensic accounting investigation into Stephen Galloway. Davies narrated with cold precision, showing the complex web of shell corporations, the trail of inflated invoices, the flow of money into hidden offshore accounts. The perfect candidate, the board's choice, was a common thief in a $1,000 suit. Mr. Pendleton's children and their allies, Davies concluded, his voice ringing with authority, urged him to hire Mr. Galloway, the safe choice, the qualified expert. Had he done so, millions of dollars meant for sick children and struggling families would have continued to line the pockets of this man. Mr. Pendleton's diner test, which this court has been told is a sign of incompetence, proved to be a more effective judge of character than a dozen background checks and a polished resume. It found the one thing a forensic accountant cannot: a good heart. The effect was instantaneous. A wave of shock rippled through the courtroom. The faces of Marcus and Victoria were a sight to behold. The carefully constructed masks of concern, shattered, replaced by the pale, slack-jawed expressions of utter defeat and humiliation. Their entire case, their entire narrative, had been publicly and spectacularly demolished. The judge banged his gavel, his face stern. His decision, when it came, was swift and decisive. He dismissed the petition for conservatorship with prejudice, affirming that Arthur Pendleton was of sound mind and body, and was fully within his rights to manage his personal and professional affairs as he saw fit. It was over. They had won. Amidst the ensuing chaos of reporters shouting questions and flashbulbs popping, Chloe felt a steadying hand on her shoulder. It was Arthur. He guided her through the scrum, a small, triumphant smile playing on his lips. In the quiet of the hallway, he looked at her, his eyes shining with pride. "I told you," he said simply. Noise. In the months that followed, Chloe, with Arthur as her mentor, didn't just step into her new role, she inhabited it. The Pendleton Hope Foundation was reborn. She established the Brenda Washington Grant for families crushed by catastrophic medical bills. She created a scholarship fund for underprivileged students and a second chance microloan program. Her office on the 60th floor was a world away from the diner, but on her sleek modern desk next to the state-of-the-art computer sat a simple, thick ceramic mug from the Morning Glory diner. Davies's team had retrieved it for her. Some days she would hold it, feeling the familiar, comforting weight in her hands. It was her anchor, a reminder of where she came from, of the true price of a cup of coffee, and of the undeniable world-changing power of choosing kindness in a world that often rewards the opposite. So the next time you see someone in need, maybe think of Chloe Washington. Her story began not with a business plan or a strategic investment, but with a $2 cup of coffee and a choice. A choice to see a person, not a problem. A choice to offer dignity when it would have been easier to look away. That single small gesture didn't just change her life or the life of one old man. It set in motion a wave of goodness that would go on to touch thousands. It proves that you don't need to be a billionaire to make a world of difference. Your character, your empathy, your willingness to act, that is a currency more valuable than any fortune. The most powerful forces for change in this world are often the quietest, most selfless acts of kindness. If this story reminded you that one person truly can make a difference, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more real-life stories that inspire and prove the incredible power of the human heart. Thank you for watching.